Hello everyone, my name is Karthik. Welcome to this lecture on information geometry and its applications to statistics. Now, information geometry is one branch of information theory that concerns with the study of the geometry arising from certain divergence or distance measures on the space of probability distributions. As we will see, it has a lot of applications to statistics and can explain in detail some of the phenomena that appear in statistics from an information theoretic viewpoint. So we shall begin this lecture by considering the problem of learning a probability distribution. So let's say we are given a set of English words. Let's say we have a corpus. Maybe these are the English words in a certain book. So let's represent this set of English words by the letter capital S. So let's call this the domain. And let's say we have measured some features on these English words. One of the features could be, is the length of a word more than 5? Yes or a no? If it's yes, let's put it as 1. If it's no, let's put it as 0. Another feature could be, does the word end in an E? Yes or a no? And so on. So we could have measured a number of such features. And now what's the problem? The problem is we would like to find the probability distribution according to which the words from these corpus would have come. In other words, we would like to find the probability distribution of the words in this corpus. However, we have already made some measurements and we would like the probability distribution we find to satisfy these measurements. In other words, we would like we would like to find a distribution that satisfies constraints of the form expected value of the first feature equal to some constant, let's say 0.3. Expected value of the second feature is equal to another constant, let's say 0.45. So all of such measurements, as many measurements we have, we would have so many constraints. Now, in the absence of any measurements, a guess on the probability distribution of the words in the corpus would be the uniform probability distribution. Why would we have any way to choose one word more likely than the other? In the absence of any information, we would have chosen the uniform distribution. But now, the uniform distribution may not actually satisfy the constraints. That is, it may not satisfy the measurements we have made. So we would like to update this uniform distribution to another distribution which satisfies the constraints that we have. So our problem is to find a distribution which satisfies the constraints but is otherwise as random as possible. In other words, it makes no assumptions, no other assumptions. Now, typically in information theory, the notion of randomness that is usually used is that of Shannon entropy. Of course, there are other generalizations of Shannon entropy, such as Rayleigh entropy, Salis entropy, that can also be used as measures of randomness. But for the purpose of this lecture, we are going to stick with Shannon entropy. So a very quick review of Shannon entropy. How do we define Shannon entropy? If we have a domain S and if we have a probability distribution Px over S, then the Shannon entropy of P is simply the summation over all the symbols in that domain S of the probability of occurrence of the symbol logarithm of 1 over the probability of occurrence of the symbol. Throughout this lecture, we are going to assume that all the logarithms are to the base 2. So let's see some examples for Shannon entropy. If we have a fair coin, then the domain is simply the set of all outcomes, which is heads or tails. For a fair coin, the probability of occurrence of each face is equal, and so the probability distribution P is simply half-half. And if we compute the entropy, if we plug in Px equal to half here for both x equal to h and x equal to t, we are going to find that h of p is 1. This is very intuitive because a fair coin is equally likely to appear heads or tails, and in order to represent this event, we would require one bit of information. For a coin which has bias 3/4, which means that it is 3 times more likely to turn up heads than it is to turn up tails. So we have slightly more information about the coin, and therefore this coin is not as random as a coin which is fair. And so if we plug in P equal to 3/4 for H and P equal to 1/4 for tails in this expression for Shannon entropy, we are going to find that the Shannon entropy is 0.81, which is less than that for a fair coin. And for a coin with bias 0.99, which means it is 99, it turns up heads with a probability of 0.99 and turns up tails with a probability of 0.21. So whenever this coin is tossed, we would most likely guess that a heads would turn up. And therefore, this coin has very less randomness in it. And this can be captured by saying that its Shannon entropy is 0.08, which is much, much smaller than that for a fair coin or for a coin with bias 3/4. Okay, so let's come back to our problem now. What did we say? We said that our problem is to find a distribution on S. So let's say S is the set of all words in a certain corpus. Now the problem is to find a distribution on S that satisfies certain measurements that we have made on the corpus, but is otherwise as random as possible. In other words, it has as high a Shannon entropy as possible. Now, this randomness is just saying that the distribution that we want to find makes no other assumptions other than the fact that we have made certain measurements. Okay, so this is our problem. Mathematically, how do we write the problem that we would like to solve? It is maximizing over all probability distributions P. What do we maximize? We would like to maximize the Shannon entropy. That is, we would like to find a distribution that has the largest Shannon entropy subject to satisfying certain measurements. That is, the expected value of the first measurement is 0.3, the expected value of the second measurement is 0.45, and so on. Here I have only written two constraints, but more generally, we can possibly have k such constraints. Okay, and let's call these k constraints expected value of ti equal to bi for I equal to 1 to k. Of course, we would like to maximize the Shannon entropy of all probability distributions, right? So we would like the constraint that px is non-negative for all x and that px sums up to 1. Now, one way to solve this problem is to use the method of Lagrange multipliers. So let capital F denote this function here. So notice that I have used certain auxiliary variables, and the method of Lagrange multipliers asks us to set the derivative of this function f with respect to px for each x. We have to set this derivative to 0. So setting the derivative to 0 and solving, we are going to get px as something as shown here. Now notice that px has to sum up to 1 across all x. So using that condition, we get that px has this nice form which is shown in the green box. So z in this expression is simply the normalization factor that makes px sum up to 1 and makes it a probability distribution. Okay, so what is very special about this form? We solved it by the method of Lagrange multipliers. So what? What is so big? What is the big deal about this? Now let's see an alternative formulation of the same problem about finding the distribution of the words in a corpus. In order to come to this alternative formulation, we are going to express Shannon entropy in a slightly different way. What do? We know that h of p is simply summation p log 1 by p across all the symbols. So that is just negative of summation p log p. Okay, fine. What we are now going to do is inside the logarithm, we are going to multiply and divide by a certain constant. And that constant is 1 over the number of elements in the corpus, number of elements in S. If we do that, the first term that we see here is a very nice term. It has a very nice interpretation in information theory. This term is what we call the KL divergence between the distribution P and U. And then there is a residual term, which is logarithm of the cardinality of the corpus. So U here is simply the uniform distribution on the corpus. Okay, so more formally, what is KL divergence? KL divergence is a very important quantity in information theory. Information theorists usually regard KL divergence as a measure of distance between two probability distributions. Given a domain S and two probability distributions P and Q on this domain S, the KL divergence between P and Q is defined simply as the sum over all elements of S, P log P by Q for each symbol. So there are some nice properties that KL divergence satisfies and some properties that it doesn't. For example, KL divergence is always non-negative. You can check that. And it is equal to 0 if and only if the argument distributions are equal to each other. So that makes it a very nice quantity. And unfortunately, It so happens that the KL divergence between distribution P with respect to distribution Q may not be the same as the KL divergence between Q with respect to P. If this condition would have satisfied, if this condition was true, that is, if it was symmetric, it would have been nice. For example, squared distance satisfies this property. If we were to imagine Euclidean distance between P and Q, 2 points P and Q in the space, the distance from P to Q is same as the distance from Q to P, however we measure, but that is not true with KL divergence. Because of these properties, it is not actually a distance measure per se. Distance in the mathematical terms, it is not really a distance. So information theorists call it a divergence. Okay, so now what is the big deal? Now we have expressed Shannon entropy in terms of the KL divergence with respect to the uniform distribution. Given a distribution P, the Shannon entropy is simply the log of the cardinality of the corpus on which this P is defined minus the KL divergence between P and U. So another interpretation for Shannon entropy is it quantifies what is the distance between P to the uniform distribution. Notice through this expression that closer P is to the uniform distribution, smaller will be the value of KL divergence and larger will be the value of Shannon entropy. This makes a lot of sense, right? If the Shannon entropy is high, what did we tell? We said that the randomness is very high. And that is quantified in another way by saying that P is very close to the most random distribution, which is the uniform distribution. So the closer P is to the most random distribution, higher the randomness in P itself. So that is what this relation is saying. Okay, so with this expression now, our central problem of learning the unknown distribution of the corpus can equivalently be written as minimizing the KL divergence with respect to the uniform distribution subject to the probability distribution satisfying the constraints that we have. That is, these are the measurements that we have made on the corpus. And we already know that the solution to the above problem is of this particular form. Px is equal to, however, whatever is shown on this particular page. Again, z is the normalization factor. Z is also sometimes called the partition function. Let's remember this term. This will come to use later. Now here, lambda i's. What are lambda i's? Lambda i's are certain parameters, and these depend on the bi's. And bi's here are the constraints. That is, these are the measurements that we have made. So lambda i's will depend on the bi's. Now, how do we actually determine these lambda i's? Of course, we have written this particular form here. This particular form simply came from the method of Lagrange multipliers, right? What was the big deal? There was no big deal in that. But the problem is, how do we find these lambda i's? That is the question. We will return to this question very shortly. This is where information geometry plays a role. Okay, I will tell you that very shortly, but we will see that a little bit later. Now, let's try to visualize what's happening in this problem. In the absence of any information, we assumed that we had no reason to assume any other distribution. So our choice for the distribution of the corpus was the uniform distribution in the absence of any information. Now we made certain measurements. We made certain measurements on the corpus, and those measurements are captured in this set L. Let's call this the constraint set. Now we had to update our earlier guess, which was the uniform distribution. We had to update it to something that satisfies the constraints. Now there may be many distributions which satisfy the constraints. Which distribution do we update it to? That is the question. Is there a structured way to update the uniform distribution to a distribution which satisfies the constraints? Well, we now have an answer. One structured way to update the uniform distribution is to follow the principle of maximizing the Shannon entropy, or equivalently minimizing the KL divergence. And by doing so, we arrived at this particular distribution where the lambda i's depend on the measurements bi. Okay, so this is what we did. Till now, this is what we have done. So P star is a very special distribution. Why is it special? Because amongst all the measurements which satisfy the measure, amongst all the probability distributions which satisfy the measurements we have, it is the unique distribution which has the maximum Shannon entropy. Okay, that is the speciality about P star. Okay, so all of this was if there was no prior information available at all. But what if we have some prior information available? In other words, let's say there are some prior measurements that are already made on the corpus. And let us say that somebody has already found out that pi is the probability distribution of the words in the corpus. Now the corpus could have gotten updated over time, and this prior information may not satisfy the new measurements that are now made. So let's say the corpus got updated with some new words. Somebody came and made a lot of new measurements, and it so happens that pi doesn't satisfy these measurements. In other words, pi now needs to be updated to a distribution which actually satisfies our measurements. So what is this problem then? It is just simply a small variant of the earlier discussed problem. Instead of uniform distribution in the second argument is pi, which is the prior information. So again, the problem is we have to update it. Update means there may be many ways of updating it. We are going to follow one structured way of updating, which is to minimize the KL divergence. So we are going to minimize the KL divergence of P with respect to pi over all P which satisfies certain measurements that we have made. Very nice. So in this case, I'm going to leave this as an exercise for you all. It can be shown that the explicit form of the optimizer for this problem, that is the solution to this problem, has a very explicit and nice form. Okay, its form is as follows. On a symbol X, it puts a mass that is proportional to the mass that the prior puts, and there is a multiplicative factor very similar to what we saw earlier. Okay, again, Z here is a normalization factor, also called the partition function, which makes Px star a probability distribution. Again, recall Px star is the optimal solution to this problem. You can use the method of Lagrange multipliers to arrive at this. I'm going to leave that as an exercise for you. So visually, the problem looks like this. We have the prior information pi. This is our prior knowledge about the probability distribution of the words in the corpus. Now somebody comes and makes new measurements. Possibly the corpus got updated with new words. Somebody came and made new measurements on the corpus. And this is the set of all probability distributions which potentially satisfy the measurements. Our pi doesn't. We need to update pi to something that satisfies the measurements. There may be many ways of updating. One structured way of updating is to minimize the KL divergence between elements of L and pi. And this is what we call the projection of pi onto L. Okay, so this in the language of information geometry is what is called the I projection of the prior pi onto the constraint set L. Okay. Now P star, as we said here above, P star has this particular form, this very nice form. Now this form has a very nice name in information geometry and statistics. It is what is called the exponential family generated by the prior pi. Notice the presence of the prior pi here. So this form for P star is what is called the exponential family generated by the prior pi. Okay. So let's now dive a little deeper and try to understand what exponential families mean in the context of projections. So it turns out that exponential families is a generic name that is given to most of the commonly used distributions that we encounter on a day-to-day basis. For example, Bernoulli distribution, Gaussian distribution, Poisson, multinomial distributions, all of these are simply instances of exponential families. So which means exponential family is something more general. And whatever I showed here for P star, this is also an instance of exponential family. Okay, so let's see what exponential family then means. In order to define an exponential family of probability distributions, one needs to define three quantities. Number one, the domain, that is the set on which this probability distribution is going to be defined. The second is the base measure. Okay, the base measure it can be a probability distribution or may not be a probability distribution, but it is a positive quantity that is defined on the underlying space. And then, of course, there are measurements, which I call features. We saw earlier that measurements can be T1 through Tk if there are K measurements. Okay, so given T1 through Tk and given a base measure H, a parametric family of probability distributions, which has this specific form here, is what is called exponential family generated by the base measure H. Okay, so again here, lambda is a vector. Lambda is lambda 1 through lambda k. Okay, it is a vector and it is a vector of parameters, which means The formula that we have written here is a parametric formula. In other words, as we vary lambda, we are going to get different members of this family. Okay. So lambda could be lambda 1 through lambda k, and all of these could potentially be real valued numbers. Lambda 1 through lambda k. Okay. So now what we are going to do is we are going to, Z here, as usual, as before, is a normalizing term that just makes P lambda a probability distribution. Okay. Now, Z is only a function of lambda 1 through lambda k. Notice that Z is simply a function of lambda 1 through lambda k. So it's a function of lambda vector. Let's write G lambda to denote logarithm of Z. Okay, so G lambda is logarithm of Z, which means it is the logarithm of the expression that is shown here. We can then write P lambda. So we just plug in G lambda here, and then so Z is e to the G lambda. Just take the exponent up and you plug it into the exponent there. We get P lambda in this new form. Okay, so let's try to, seeing this expression for the first time can be very confusing because it's not very clear if the commonly occurring distributions that we know of, such as Bernoulli, Gaussian, multinomial, if all of these can actually be expressed in this form is still not clear. Okay, so let's do that now. Let's try to see that the commonly occurring distributions that we know of can actually be written in this form, which means that they're actually exponential families. Okay, so let's take a Bernoulli. In the case of Bernoulli, the domain is simply 0, 1. These are the outcomes of a coin toss, tails or a heads. 0 for tails and 1 for heads. Now we can set the base measure as 1. We will see why. And then let's say T of x is equal to x. If we set T of x is equal to x, then what is G lambda? G lambda is simply this expression here. So let's plug in h of x equal to 1, T of x equal to x. So there is only one parameter here. So you get log of 1 plus e to the lambda. There is only one lambda. There is no lambda 1, lambda 2 up to lambda k. There is only one lambda here. Okay. And therefore, P lambda of x is simply the quantity that is shown here, e to the lambda x divided by 1 plus e to the lambda. So if you plug in x equal to 1, then the probability on 1, which is simply the probability of heads, is e to the lambda divided by 1 plus e to the lambda. And the probability of tails is 1 by 1 plus e to the lambda. Now, we are actually accustomed to seeing Bernoulli distributions in this form. Which form? P lambda of 1 is equal to some theta and P lambda of 0 equal to 1 minus theta. This is what we typically call a Bernoulli theta distribution. Here we have a slightly different parameterization, that's all. Okay, so you just have theta and lambda being related as theta equal to e to the lambda by 1 plus e to the lambda. So what? It's no big difference. It's just a new parameterization, that's all. It's a one-to-one parameterization. Okay, let's see why Poisson can be fit as an exponential family. In the case of Poisson, the domain is simply the set of non-negative integers. Going by the form of the Poisson distribution, it seems natural to select h of x, the base measure, as 1 by x factorial. Setting t of x equal to x, we then get g of lambda as e to the lambda. Again, there is only one parameter here because Poisson is parameterized by just a single parameter, and it so happens that P lambda of x can be written in this form. This is exactly the Poisson distribution, but parameterized in a slightly different way. What do I mean by that? We are usually accustomed to the parameterization Poisson theta. We usually say Poisson theta, but this is not Poisson lambda. This is Poisson something else. What is it? This is Poisson theta, but with theta being equal to e to the lambda. That's all. Or in other words, lambda being equal to log theta. This is just a different parameterization. That's all. It is because of this different parameterization that these distributions look a little different to our eyes. Okay. Now, finally, I'm going to take the example of a Gaussian distribution. Gaussian, the domain is the whole of reals. H of x, we'll set it as 1 over square root of 2 pi. It's a constant. And t of x is now a vector. Okay, Gaussian is parameterized by two parameters. So t of x is now going to be a vector. There are two features, x and x squared. If we are going to represent n of mu comma sigma square, that is a Gaussian with mean mu and variance sigma square, if we want to represent this distribution as an exponential family, then it turns out that the vector lambda has to be given by lambda 1 equal to mu over sigma square and lambda 2 equal to minus 1 over 2 sigma square. It's a different parameterization, as I said. It just takes a little while for us to get used to this new parameterization. So with this parameterization, one can write down the distribution, and it so happens that it comes out in the standard form, which is the form of the Gaussian distribution that we all know, with mean mu and variance sigma square. Okay, I'm going to leave that as an exercise. You can try it out. Just notice the difference in the parameterization. In all the three cases, the parameterization was different. That's all. There was a one-to-one relationship between the natural parameterization and the other parameterization that we are usually accustomed to. So the parameterization that we use here, which is slightly different to our eyes, is what is called natural parameterization. It is natural in a slightly different way. Okay, it is not natural in the sense that it is natural to us. It is natural in a slightly different way. Okay, so we have seen why Gaussian, Bernoulli, and Poisson were exponential families. Now let's return to studying some properties of exponential families. Recall this normalizing factor G lambda, which is the log of the partition function. It so happens, one can check this, it so happens that G is a strictly convex function. One of the things that strictly convex functions have in properties is that one of the properties of strictly convex functions is that their derivative is a one-to-one mapping. Okay, that's a very nice mapping. It's a one-to-one mapping. Okay, and it so happens that the derivative with respect to the ith component is actually expectation of the ith feature. Expectation of the ith feature if there are k features. Okay. If there is only one feature, that is, if there is only lambda, then the partial derivative will be the normal derivative dg by d lambda. If there are k features, then it's the derivative. So I'm going to leave this as an exercise. Okay, so now we come back to the central problem. We said that we can update the probability distribution as an I projection and all of that. That's all okay. But how do we determine the constants lambda 1 through lambda k in the expression for the I projection, in the expression for P star? Okay, the expression for P star, we simply got it by Lagrange multipliers. That was no big deal. But how do we actually determine the lambda 1 through lambda k? Here is where information geometry comes in. So let's see. Let's see some examples to begin with, some easy examples. So let's say we want to fit a Poisson distribution to integer data with mean 7.5. What do? It says the measured feature is mean, which means we want expected value of x, which means we should have t of x as x, so that we have expectation of t is equal to 7.5. So expectation of x is equal to 7.5. Now, for Poisson, we know that g of lambda is e to the lambda. And what we just saw here is that the derivative of g is simply the expectation of t. So therefore, dg by d lambda is simply the expectation of t1, which in this case is t, which is equal to 7.5, which means lambda is simply the natural logarithm of 7.5. Okay, so this is a very easy example. We could easily find the lambda. Finding lambda 1 through lambda k, here there's only one lambda. We could easily find the lambda. Okay, let's do another example. We are told that a distribution over the reals has mean 0 and variance phi, but is otherwise as random as possible. Can we write down the form for this distribution? So what we are saying is we want a maximum entropy distribution on the reals which has mean 0 and variance phi. Of course, the answer is exponential family. But that exponential family should have mean equal to 0. That is one of the features. So t1 of x should be x. Very good. Variance should be phi, which means t2 of x should be x squared. So that expectation of x squared is equal to phi, because expectation of x is 0. Now it turns out that these features, t1 of x equal to x and t2 of x equal to x squared, actually define a Gaussian distribution. So what we are asking for is, amongst all the Gaussians, just pick a Gaussian which has mean 0 and variance phi. That's all. This is the distribution we are looking for. This is the maximum entropy distribution. However, just notice that we have mu equal to 0 and sigma square equal to 10. These are not lambda 1 and lambda 2. Lambda 1 and lambda 2 are given by these expressions which I showed earlier. So we have to plug in mu equal to 0 and sigma square equal to 10 to get lambda 1 and lambda 2. Once we get lambda 1 and lambda 2, we know what is the form for p lambda or p star lambda, which is the optimum, or which is the maximum entropy distribution. Okay, so this is the Gaussian with mean 0 and variance 10. Okay, so far so nice. What we should note, however, is that going from the parameterization mu comma sigma square to lambda 1 comma lambda 2 in the Gaussian example was pretty easy because we had closed form expressions for lambda 1 and lambda 2. Given lambda 1 and lambda 2, we can get mu and sigma square in terms of lambda 1 and lambda 2 and vice versa. So it was very easy to go from lambda world to the other parameterization that we are accustomed to. Similarly, in the Poisson case, or even in the Bernoulli case for that matter, going from the theta to the lambda was very easy. Okay, that was because the derivative of the log partition function g, the derivative of g could be easily inverted. It was an invertible mapping. This may not always be the case. So if it is not always the case, if it cannot be inverted so easily, if one cannot go from the usual parameterization that we are used to the natural parameterization that we want to come to, if we cannot invert between these spaces very easily, then it will be very difficult to find the lambda 1 through lambda k. Although we have a solution from Lagrange multiplier method, finding lambda 1 through lambda k will not be easy. Okay. Now, in such cases, what do we do? If it cannot be inverted so easily, what do we do? Okay, this is where information geometry helps us. And the way it helps us is through a very special property, which is called the Pythagorean property. So let's see what this Pythagorean property is. Again, we are back to the same problem. The problem is that we have a prior guess on the distribution of the words in the corpus. Let's say the corpus got updated and somebody came and made some measurements. Now this pi has to be updated to some probability distribution which satisfies the constraints, which satisfies the measurements we have made. And the way we can do this in a structured way is by minimizing the KL divergence between all the elements here and pi. In other words, find the element here in L, which is the closest to pi. And that member is what we are calling P star. Again, just to recall, we know that P star is a member of the exponential family generated by pi and all of that. And what we don't know is the lambda i's in the expression for P star. Okay, we will find lambda i's. Okay, but just for this moment, let's consider some other probability distribution P in L, okay, which is not P star, some other P. Let's try to see how the KL divergence between P and pi is related to the KL divergence between P star and pi. Of course, we know that the KL divergence between P star and pi is the smallest among the KL divergences of any member here with respect to pi. But nevertheless, there are many other members which satisfy the constraints, no? So what is their KL divergence with respect to pi? What does that look like? Let's try to see what that looks like. So let's consider the KL divergence between any other member P in L with respect to pi, and let's subtract out the KL divergence between P star and pi. So with a small bit of manipulation, we are going to arrive at this expression here. Now recall that P star has a particular form. It is pi x into e to the something. It depends on the lambda i's, the ti's of x's and all of that. I showed you that earlier, right? So just plug that value in there and you're going to get this particular term here. Okay, we just use the explicit form for P star. Recall that P star is a member of the exponential family generated by pi. So we are going to plug that in here. And then a small bit of manipulation. What is the trick that we are using? P star and P, both of them lie in L. That is a very important observation, which means both of them satisfy these measurements. And therefore, summation over all x, P star into Ti is same as summation over all x, P star into Ti. Summation over all x, P into Ti. Both P and P star satisfy the constraints that we have. And therefore, we can replace Px star with Px. Okay, so far so good. Now we turn this back into the logarithm of P star by pi. Okay, that is how we actually arrived at this expression in the first place. So we turn it back into logarithm of P star by pi. A small simplification is going to show that we will be left with this term here. P log P by P star, which is simply the KL divergence between P and P star. So what do we have finally? The KL divergence between P and a pi, some other P, which is not P star, P and pi, is actually equal to the KL divergence between P and P star plus the KL divergence between P star and pi. Doesn't this look very familiar? If we were to use square Euclidean distance, for example, this is like saying square root of the hypotenuse is equal to square of the base plus square of the height. It is something like that, but this is not square, this is KL divergence. Because of such great similarity between these two expressions, this relation in green box is what is called the Pythagorean theorem for KL divergence. Pythagoras theorem for squared Euclidean distance is very well known to many people. AC square is equal to AB square plus BC square. An exact analog of that actually holds even for the KL divergence, specifically with respect to the projection P star. Okay. An important application. So why did I even discuss Pythagorean property here? How is this even related to finding lambda 1 through lambda k? Because that is the problem that we were after, right? We want to find lambda 1 through lambda k. How is Pythagorean property like this going to help us find lambda 1 through lambda k? Now, this is where is an important contribution by one of the giants in information theory. His name is Chizar. So Chizar has proposed a successive projection algorithm in order to find the projection P star itself. No Lagrange multiplier, nothing. Simply apply Chizar's successive projection algorithm, we get P star directly. So let's see how we do that, how we get that. What Chizar says is, there are lambda 1 through lambda k that have to be found out. Let's find it step by step. Let's first find the best lambda 1. Let's next find lambda 2, lambda 3, and so on. Let's finally arrive at lambda k. That is Chizar's idea. Okay. In order to do that, what Chizar does is he reduces a multidimensional problem to a series of one-dimensional problems. So what he first defines is this set Li. Li is the set of all probability distributions which only satisfy the ith measurement, not all the measurements. There are k measurements, recall. Li is the set of all probability distributions which satisfy only the ith measurement. Of course, this P star that we arrive at finally also satisfies this ith measurement because it satisfies all the measurements. It automatically satisfies the ith measurement. So P star is automatically there in Li for every I. Okay. So Li is defined like this. There are k such L's, L1, L2, L3 up to Lk. Now Chizar's algorithm is as follows. Start at time t equal to 0, set P0 as your prior information pi. As time progresses, take Pt, project Pt onto the L in the next step. Okay, T mod k. We just rotate between the L1 through Lk. For example, take P0, project it to L1, you get P1. Take P1, project it to L2, you get P2. Take P2, project it to L3, you get P3, and so on. If there are only 3, take P3, project it to L1 again. You just rotate back from L1 to Lk and back to L1. Okay, that is the T mod k here. So just keep on doing this iteratively and just loop until convergence. Okay, so visual demonstration of this is as follows. If there are only 2 constraints, take pi, project it to L1, you get P1. Take P1, project it to L2, you get P2. Take P2, project it to L1, you get P3, and so on. Keep on doing. If we keep on doing this, what is the guarantee we will converge? What is the guarantee we will stop? What if we keep on going on and on and on and we don't stop at all? That doesn't happen. Chizar showed that convergence actually takes place. I'll come back to that. So descriptively, at any given time t, projecting Pt onto Li is simply finding that particular lambda I such that this distribution exponential family only on ith constraint satisfies the ith measurement. That's all. Chizar says handle one measurement at a time. Handle one constraint at a time. Okay. Now, for exponential families, we already know that the expected value of the measurement is simply equal to the derivative of the log partition function. We already saw that. And there is only one constraint we need to handle now. dg over d lambda I is expectation of ti, which is bi. Okay. So all we need to do is find that particular lambda I. We are handling one constraint at a time, remember? So all we need to do in order to find lambda I is go and search for that lambda I, which makes sure that the derivative of g is equal to bi. That's all. And this is a very simple problem because this is a one-dimensional problem. We just have to find lambda I. This particular problem, recall that g prime is a one-to-one function. G is a strictly convex function. So g prime is a one-to-one function. All we need to do in order to find such a lambda I is use a very simple algorithm like line search. That will do the job for us. And we iteratively keep doing this until we converge. And why do we even converge? This is where the Pythagorean property helps us. Okay. So the proof that this actually works is because at any given time, the projection at time t plus 1 is actually closer to p star than the projection pt. We may not know p star, we need not even know p star, but we know that there exists some p star out there, right? There is some optimizer. All we want to do is we want to find that optimizer explicitly. What Chizar says is, in this space of probability distributions, pt plus 1, pt plus 2 keep on approaching p star. Okay, and if we have a sequence of non-negative numbers which are non-increasing, then they definitely converge. We know that property from real analysis, and therefore we are guaranteed of convergence. We will guaranteely converge. Okay, so in this way, step by step, we find all the lambdas till we converge. At the point of convergence, we have the lambda 1 through lambda k. Beautiful, right? So the point is that we could break down a multidimensional problem into a series of one-dimensional problems because scale divergence satisfies certain nice properties, one of those being the Pythagorean property. Okay, it is properties like these that information theorists, in particular information geometry researchers, look for. It is properties like these that information geometry people try to study. Okay, of course, we have considered only one particular divergence measure, which is the KL divergence. One can actually study similar property for many other divergences. I will be touching upon that very briefly towards the end of this lecture. Okay, so we have already completed the problem of projections. We had a pi. So let's go back to our problem. Let's visualize the problem. We had a pi. We wanted to update pi to a probability distribution which satisfies certain measurements we have made. And the way we are going to do that is by minimizing the KL divergence. Why minimize KL divergence? Why not minimize some other quantity, you may ask? Well, you can certainly do that, but are there nice properties for that quantity you want to minimize? KL divergence satisfies nice properties, one of those being the Pythagorean property. So with the help of Chizar's algorithm, it's called Chizar's successive projection algorithm. With the help of Chizar's successive projection algorithm, we were able to find what is P star, and we were also able to determine the lambda 1 through lambda k in the expression for P star. And that's how we arrive at the optimal solution. Okay, so now having covered all of these, let's just formalize whatever we have studied until now in a slightly different language. So till now, we were given a prior and a constraint set L. Again, when I say constraint set, I mean the set of measurements. And we were interested in minimizing the KL divergence between P and the prior pi, where the minimization is over all the elements in the constraint set. Now, information geometry people have given a nice name for this problem. They call it the problem of forward I projection. The I here simply means information or KL divergence. Okay, so it's called the I projection. The element P star, which attains this minimum, is what is called the projection of pi onto L. It's the projection of pi onto L. Okay, so that's what it is called. On the contrary, so notice here that we fixed the second argument. We held it constant at pi. We only varied the first argument over all the elements in L. On the contrary, if we fix the first argument and vary the elements of the second argument, then that is a problem of reverse I projection. Okay, so reverse I projection is all about minimizing P over L of the KL divergence between pi and P. Now, notice that the KL divergence between pi and P may not be the same as the KL divergence between P and pi. And therefore, forward and reverse projections are maybe completely different quantities. Okay, what is an instance of reverse projection? Now, one example from statistics where reverse projection occurs very naturally is in the problem of maximum likelihood estimation. So what is this problem? Let's say L is some parametric family, P theta, and theta is coming from some set capital theta. So we have a parametric family of probability distributions which are parameterized by elements of the set theta. Now, in the maximum likelihood estimation problem, what we are given is that we are given n samples, independent and identically distributed according to some P theta naught for some theta naught. We don't know what theta naught is. Nobody has told us theta naught, but somebody has given us samples from P theta naught. Okay, we don't know the theta naught, therefore we don't know what is P theta naught also. The goal is just using the samples, we have to trace back the distribution. We have to go back to which theta. Did it actually come from theta naught is the question. How do we find out which distribution it came from is the question. Now there are many choices. One may simply guess it came from theta 1, from theta 1. That's not a nice way of doing it. So given samples x1 through xn, how do we find out which distribution all of these have come from? That is the question. And one nice way to do that is through the principle of maximum likelihood estimation. In this principle, what we do is we say that, look, these x1 through xn would have come from p theta star, where theta star is an element such that the likelihood is maximized amongst all the members of theta. In other words, we look at p theta for each theta, we compute the probability that x1 through xn could have occurred under that p theta, and we see under which theta is this probability the highest. In other words, which distribution could have most likely produced x1 through xn. That is the whole idea here. So if such a theta star exists, it is called a maximum likelihood estimate. Okay, so now suppose xi's, these x1 through xn, suppose they take value from a finite set S. Let's call this set S as 1, 2, 3 up to capital 1, 2, 3 up to D. Then notice that we can write logarithm of p theta of x1 through xn as summation of the logarithm of p theta of xi. This is because x1 through xn are independent of each other, and therefore this joint probability is simply the product of the individual probabilities, and logarithm of a product is sum of the logarithms. Okay, now this summation of the logarithm of p of xi's can be written in another nice way. You count how many times little x, symbol little x, has occurred amongst x1 through xn. So x1 through xn are all elements from this set S, 1, 2, 3 up to D. Some of them can be 1, some of them can be 2, some of them can be 3, etc. Some of them can be D. You count how many of them are 1, how many of them are 2, how many of them are 3. And because this is a summation, if 1 has occurred 10 times, it will be 10 times log p theta of 1. If 2 has occurred 20 times, then it will be 20 times logarithm p theta of 2, because this is a running summation. And therefore, you just count how many times each x has occurred amongst the x1 through xn, and you multiply that with the logarithm of the probability that x has occurred. Very nice. So this expression is okay. What we now simply do is multiply and divide by little n. Okay, no big deal. Now you take little n outside and do a small algebra. Okay, you just multiply and divide by n of x by n inside the logarithm. Let's define p hat of x as n of x by n. Notice that p hat is a probability distribution, because if n of x is a number of times x occurs in 1, 2, 3 up to n, x1 through xn. So when it is summed up across all the x, we should end up with n symbols overall. So therefore, p hat of x is a probability distribution. So therefore, we get n times. So just small algebra will tell us that this expression is equal to negative of n times the KL divergence between p hat and p theta plus the Shannon entropy of p theta. Okay, so therefore, theta star, which was the theta that is the most likely to have produced x1 through xn, is same as the theta that is most likely to have produced logarithm of the probability. Correct? So maximizing p theta over all theta is same as maximizing the logarithm of p theta, because logarithm is a monotone increasing function. But we know that logarithm of p theta is inversely related to the KL divergence between p hat and p theta, and therefore maximizing the logarithm of p theta is equivalent to minimizing the KL divergence between p hat and p theta. Notice here that the minimization is across the second argument here. The first argument is kept fixed at p hat. So this is like the reverse projection of p hat onto this family p theta. So this is what is called a reverse I projection. And we saw that reverse I projections arise very naturally in ML estimation. Okay, so let's see how ML estimation looks like in exponential families in particular. Okay, recall, suppose pi is a prior and t1 through tk are certain features or certain measurements that are made, then pi as well as t1 through tk define a parametric family called the exponential family. This family is parameterized by k parameters, lambda 1 through lambda k. If there are k constraints, if there are k measurements, there are k parameters. Okay, and p lambda has this particular form that we saw. It is the parametric family it is the exponential family generated by pi. And of course, g lambda is the log partition function. Now let's come back to let's understand maximum likelihood estimation for this family. So what do we have? We have x1 through xn, which are drawn independently and identically according to p lambda naught for some lambda naught. Somebody has already drawn these samples. We don't know which distribution they have drawn it from. Our goal is to find out which distribution. One structured, principled way to find out which distribution is maximum likelihood estimation. So for that, what we do is we write down the likelihood under p lambda. Okay, one can check. Please do this. I'm going to leave this as an exercise. Please check that logarithm of p lambda has this particular expression here. Therefore, if we want to find the maximum likelihood expression, we just have to maximize this particular quantity over all the lambda. Maximizing and finding the lambda which maximizes this logarithm of p lambda is simply taking the derivative of this expression and setting it equal to 0. So let's take partial derivatives and set it equal to 0. If we do that, what we are going to find is that the partial derivative of g, which is the log partition function, with respect to the ith parameter, is simply the sample mean of the ith measurement, where the sample mean is taken across all the samples x1 through xn. Very nice, right? So the ith derivative of g is simply the sample mean of the ith feature. Okay, it's simply the sample mean. Therefore, what is the ML estimate? ML estimate is simply that lambda for which the above condition holds. You just have to find the lambda I which satisfies this particular condition. That is, dou g by dou lambda I is simply the sample mean across the ith feature. So that is one nice property for maximum likelihood estimation. Okay, maximum likelihood estimation and the maximum entropy distributions are very closely connected to each other. Okay. So in summary, what we saw is that Shannon entropy is a common measure of randomness that is used in information theory. Maximum entropy principle is a principle that is typically used to find the unknown probability distribution using certain measurements. Okay, there are a certain set of measurements. A certain prior distribution needs to be updated in order to satisfy these measurements. What is the principled way to do that? If somebody asks you that question, one way to do it is through maximizing the Shannon entropy or equivalently minimizing KL divergence. We saw that forward I projection, that is minimizing KL divergence, is the principle of I projection. I is standing for information and information meaning KL divergence. Now, forward I projection is a problem where we are going to minimize the KL divergence between the first argument. We will vary the first argument of KL divergence and we will keep the second argument fixed. That minimizer will definitely be a member of the exponential family. That is what we saw, which means it has a very nice form. Further, I projection satisfies a very nice property which is called the Pythagorean property. So this Pythagorean property is satisfied not only by KL divergence. We know that it is satisfied by squared Euclidean distance, for example. So is there a large class of other divergences which also satisfy Pythagorean property? The answer is yes. We have a class of divergences called Bregmann's divergences. Every divergence in Bregmann's divergence family satisfies the Pythagorean property. KL divergence and squared Euclidean distance are simply examples of Bregmann's divergences. There are more general divergences which satisfy these properties, that is this Pythagorean property. And information geometry involves the study of projection of these other divergence measures also. Because they satisfy Pythagorean property, there must be nice geometry in those. Studying the geometry of those divergence measures is what information geometry is usually about. In this lecture, what we try to see is how information geometry can play a role in understanding certain phenomena in statistics, such as projections, maximum likelihood estimation, and so on. Finally, we touched upon reverse I projection, where we held the first argument fixed and we minimized KL divergence with respect to the second argument over a certain family. And we saw that maximum likelihood estimation is an instance of reverse I projection. So of course, one can use many other measures of divergence. Even before that, entropy. We use Shannon entropy. One could possibly use other measures of entropy, other measures of randomness, such as Rayleigh entropy, Salis entropy, and so on. Now, each of these entropies, just like how Shannon entropy could be expressed in terms of KL divergence, it had a negative, it had an inverse relationship with respect to KL divergence. Similarly, one can arrive at divergences from Rayleigh entropy, which is called Rayleigh divergence. Salis entropy is simply a monotone function of Rayleigh entropy. So Salis entropy and Rayleigh entropy are somewhat similar to each other, and they lead to what are called Rayleigh divergence, and there are many other forms of divergence. So when there are so many divergences out there, which one do we use is the question. Is there a natural way to pick one of these divergences to solve the problem at hand? This usually depends on what properties those divergences have. As we saw here, Pythagorean property was the one which enabled us to show convergence of Chizar's successive projection algorithm. So when one wants to do an algorithm like that, it's very important to know that the algorithm converges. And properties such as the Pythagorean property help us deduce such convergence properties. Okay, so information geometry is much more broader. I hope I have given a small introduction to information geometry about the geometry arising from KL divergence, how it is related to projections, exponential families, and maximum likelihood estimation, which one commonly encounters in statistics. Thank you all for your attention.